Visual agnosia is a rare vision-related disorder in which an individual can see objects but cannot correctly identify them. Their eyesight functions normally, yet their brain fails to interpret what they're looking at. In other words, they can perceive shapes and colors but not understand what those visuals represent.
I see colours, shapes, punctuated by faces, the faces of people which I really recognise, and they stand out much more than anything else. That's why I can't read words or read music anymore. So I still can imagine what it looks like in my mind's eye, but I can't imagine what it looks like, or I can't see what it looks like when I look at it. So essentially, I find things through colour.
Someone suffering from visual agnosia might, for instance, see a chair and mistake it for a small child. While that's an extreme example, most patients simply confuse objects with others of a similar shape, such as mistaking a pink smartphone for a bar of soap. There are also several subtypes of this disorder, depending on what kind of recognition is impaired. Patients with alexia cannot distinguish between different words, seeing all text as identical patterns. Those with environmental agnosia struggle to recognize familiar surroundings, making navigation nearly impossible. Visual agnosia is fascinating, not only for how it distorts perception but also for what it reveals about the brain's intricate mechanisms. The condition demonstrates how fragile the connection is between sight and understanding. It can sometimes be triggered by head trauma or a stroke, but more commonly, it develops gradually with age, especially in people suffering from dementia or other neurodegenerative diseases. Symptoms often start subtly, with occasional misidentifications, and worsen over time as the brain's ability to interpret visual information deteriorates. One of the most well-known and bizarre cases of visual agnosia was documented by neurologist Oliver Sacks in his acclaimed book, The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat. The title refers directly to the patient in question, identified by Sacks as Mr. P, though we'll call him Peter for simplicity. Peter was a talented musician and later became a music teacher. It was during his years teaching that the first signs of his condition began to emerge. Occasionally, a student would stand directly before him, yet Peter couldn't recognize their face. Only when the student spoke would Peter identify them by voice. Although this caused confusion and embarrassment, he dismissed it as unimportant. As the years went by, however, Peter's condition worsened. He not only failed to recognize people's faces, but also began perceiving faces where none existed. He once patted a fire hydrant, mistaking it for a student, and at times even addressed parking meters as if they were people. His sense of reality gradually blurred. He began speaking to carved faces on furniture, waiting for them to reply, then expressing surprise when they didn't. This continued for nearly 3 years as Peter refused to acknowledge that anything was seriously wrong. It wasn't until he developed diabetes and visited an ophthalmologist, believing his eyesight was failing, that the truth surfaced. After listening to Peter's strange descriptions of what he saw, the ophthalmologist realized the problem wasn't with his eyes at all, but with his brain. He referred Peter to Oliver Sacks for further examination. During the evaluation, Sacks handed Peter a copy of National Geographic and asked him to describe what he saw. Peter could identify individual details such as colors, shapes, and brightness, but when asked to describe the overall scene, he was completely lost. The most astonishing moment came as the session ended. When preparing to leave, Peter reached toward his wife, grasped her head, and tried to lift it, believing it was his hat. In that instant, it became unmistakably clear. Peter was suffering from visual agnosia. Unfortunately, there was no treatment available to restore his recognition abilities. Instead, Peter adapted. He learned to rely on his other senses, particularly sound and touch, to identify people and objects. His story stands as a powerful testament to the adaptability of the human brain, even when faced with such a profoundly disorienting condition as visual agnosia. Alien hand syndrome is exactly what it sounds like, a condition in which a person loses control over one of their hands, usually the left. This so-called alien hand moves on its own, often in unpredictable and unsettling ways, making the patient feel as though the hand doesn't belong to them. What makes this condition particularly disturbing is how the rogue hand can act in direct opposition to the other. Imagine flipping a light switch only for your uncontrolled hand to immediately turn it back off. In some cases, the hand can even be aggressive, with reports of it trying to choke the patient, a terrifying and deeply unsettling experience. While the exact cause of this disorder isn't fully understood, it is more commonly observed in people who have undergone split brain surgery. For context, the human brain is divided into two hemispheres, connected by a thick bundle of nerves called the corpus callosum. Each hemisphere controls the opposite side of the body. The left brain controls the right side, while the right brain controls the left. Beyond motor control, the left hemisphere houses the language centers that allow us to articulate thoughts, the very voice of our conscious self. During split brain surgery, the corpus callosum is severed to treat severe, drug-resistant epilepsy. The theory behind Alien-Hand syndrome is that this procedure prevents the right hemisphere from communicating its intentions to the left hemisphere, which controls speech. As a result, the right brain remains conscious and aware, but unable to verbally express itself. Since it cannot communicate through words, the right hemisphere often expresses itself physically, using the hand under its control. A real-life example is Karen Byrne from New Jersey. At age 27, she underwent split brain surgery to treat epilepsy, which was initially successful, until her left hand began moving on its own. Karen recounted the first incident during a doctor's visit. Dr. O'Connor said, "Karen, what are you doing? Your hand's undressing you." Until then, I had no idea that my left hand was unbuttoning my shirt. I tried rebuttoning with my right hand, but as soon as I stopped, the left hand started unbuttoning again. He made an emergency call to another doctor, saying, "Mike, you've got to get here right away, we've got a problem." Karen explained how the syndrome affects her daily life. "I'd light a cigarette and balance it on an ashtray, and my left hand would reach forward and stub it out. It would take things out of my handbag, and I wouldn't even notice until later. I lost a lot of things before realizing what was happening." In the most extreme cases, the left hand could even lash out violently against Karen without warning. If the split brain theory is accurate, Alien-Hand syndrome raises unsettling questions about identity and self-control. Despite its disturbing implications, the disorder remains extremely rare, making it difficult to study. Combined with the brain's incredible complexity, this means we are unlikely to fully understand it anytime soon. 𝐾𝐨 syndrome, also known as Cotard's delusion or walking corpse syndrome, is an extremely rare mental disorder in which a person believes they are dead, no longer exist, or have lost vital internal organs or blood. The condition was first identified by French neurologist Jules Cotard in 1880. He described it as a previously unrecognized form of severe depression, noting that affected individuals often stopped caring for themselves, became emotionally numb, and lost interest in activities they once enjoyed. Later research revealed that walking corpse syndrome is not a standalone disorder, but rather a consequence of extreme depression and anxiety, sometimes progressing into psychosis or schizophrenia. Near-death experiences can also trigger similar effects, as seen when individuals briefly die or nearly die before being resuscitated. One real-life example is Army veteran Warren McKinley. After surviving a serious motorcycle accident, the resulting stress and frontal lobe trauma caused him to develop walking corpse syndrome, illustrating how extreme physical and emotional stress can precipitate the disorder.
What I felt was, what's the point?
And that's how you felt emotionally. What's the point?
Why I was at Headley Court and they were trying to help me and
to rehab you.
Yeah. And I was just...
You felt like a ghost, didn't you?
What's the point?
Like a ghost, dead man walking.
Yeah.
Modern studies have also found a link between Cotard syndrome and damage to brain areas responsible for facial recognition. In anxious patients, this can prevent them from recognizing their own reflection, leading to the delusion that they must be dead. Researchers have identified 3 stages of Cotard syndrome, beginning with the germination stage, which closely resembles typical depression. During the germination stage, patients experience symptoms like insomnia, loneliness, and loss of interest in both work and personal life. The condition then progresses to the blooming stage, where the symptoms become more distinct. Patients may claim that parts of their body are missing or rotting, insist they are already dead, or even assert that they no longer exist. The final and most terrifying stage is the chronic stage. At this point, Delusions of death become fully entrenched, leading patients to reject help and deny reality. Rehabilitation becomes extremely challenging. As individuals see no reason to care for themselves, they believe they are already dead. Patients at this stage tend to fall into one of two categories. About 55% develop a delusion of immortality. They are aware that their body still functions but are convinced they have lost vital organs, interpreting their continued bodily function as proof of their unnatural. The case of a 43-year-old woman, referred to as Model X in Cotard's original report, exemplifies this form of psychosis. Cotard described her beliefs in detail. Model X affirms she has no brain, no nerves, no chest, no stomach, no intestines, only the skin and bones of a decomposing body. She has no soul. God does not exist, neither does the devil. She is nothing more than a decomposing body and has no need to eat for a living. She cannot die naturally, she exists eternally. If she is not burned, fire is the only solution. Tragically, Cotard had no way to treat her at the time, and she eventually died from starvation after refusing food. While some patients may find comfort in the illusion of immortality, others endure a far more nightmarish existence. One particularly disturbing case involved a 65-year-old retired teacher, referred to as Mr. B. Let's call him Brian. In early 2010, Brian began experiencing intense sadness, social withdrawal, anxiety, poor sleep and appetite, and feelings of worthlessness and guilt. Over time, these symptoms escalated into delusions of catastrophe, nihilism, and persecution. Brian became convinced that his organs had stopped working, his brain had ceased functioning, and even his house was crumbling. The despair became so overwhelming that he attempted suicide multiple times. His final note revealed his fear of spreading a deadly infection to others in his village. Even after being admitted to the hospital, he attempted suicide 2 more times before fully believing he was dead and refusing to eat. Thankfully, doctors were able to diagnose him with Cotard syndrome in time and provide treatment. Unlike the era when Jules Cotard first described the syndrome, modern medicine now offers effective interventions. Although Cotard syndrome is not officially recognized in diagnostic manuals like the DSM-5 or ICD-10, studies show that treatments such as psychiatric medication and electroconvulsive therapy can help patients recover. Advances in brain imaging and neuroscience may also allow researchers to better understand the causes of Cotard syndrome and develop ways to prevent it in the future. Moral of the story is, the human brain can be both brilliant and terrifying when it loses balance.